There's a specific kind of pain that hits when your avoidant ex shows up with someone new, and they did it fast. It doesn't just feel like they moved on, it feels like they replaced you. It feels like they took all the love, the patience, the openness, the emotional availability you asked for, the things they told you they couldn't give, and handed every bit of it to someone else. Like it was easy, like you were the thing that made it hard. And underneath the jealousy, underneath the comparison, underneath the late nights scrolling through their new photos, there's one question that cuts deeper than all the others. Was I the problem? Let me answer that right now, before we go any further. No, you were not the problem. Their new relationship is not a verdict on your worth, and the speed they move doesn't measure your value. It measures their need for relief. When an avoidant ex jumps into someone new quickly, it usually says far more about what they're running from than about anything you lacked. The new person isn't better than you, they're earlier than you. They're meeting a version of your ex that hasn't been tested yet, by history, by conflict, by vulnerability, by accountability, by any of the real emotional pressure that builds when two people actually get close. So if you're watching their new relationship and quietly tearing yourself apart, this video is for you, not to give you false hope, not to tell you they'll come back, not to promise the new thing falls apart, but to give you something more useful than fantasy, clarity, because once you understand what you're really looking at, it loses its power to make you feel small. Let's start with what you actually see. You see the photos, the smile, the arm around them, the caption you'd never have gotten. You see a timeline that's far too short to make sense. You see affection, open, public, easy affection, going to someone who isn't you. And the cruelest part? You see the new person receiving the exact version of your ex you spent the whole relationship asking for. That's what makes it feel like humiliation, like comparison, like you've been erased and written over, like the relationship you lived through has been quietly deleted and replaced with a better edition. I want to name that wound clearly, because pretending it doesn't hurt would be a lie. It does hurt. It's supposed to hurt. You're not weak or crazy for feeling gutted by it. But here's where I need you to slow down, because your mind is about to draw a conclusion that isn't true. Before we go any further, if this is speaking to the exact place you're in right now, take a second to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It helps this reach the next person sitting with the same question, staring at the same kind of photos, and wondering whether they were replaced or just forgotten. And if you do leave a comment, tell me this. Is it the speed they moved on, or the person they moved on with, that hurts the most? Because those are two different wounds, and both of them deserve to be understood clearly. So let's get one thing clear. Their new relationship is not a verdict. Their public happiness is not evidence that you failed. Their speed is not a measurement of your worth. A photo is a single frame. A caption is one sentence. A 2-week-old relationship is a fantasy that hasn't met reality yet. None of those things can tell you who was better. They can only tell you that your ex found somewhere new to put their attention, and that they're showing you the highlight reel of the easy part. You weren't erased. You were just there for the part that got hard. Now, let's talk about why they move so fast, because the speed is usually the biggest clue. For a lot of avoidant people, especially the ones who go straight from one relationship into the next, a new partner doesn't function like love, it functions like relief. Here's what I mean. When a relationship ends, there's a pile of hard feelings waiting on the other side of it. Grief, guilt, shame, the empty space where someone used to be, the quiet, uncomfortable question of, why does this keep happening to me? Most people have to sit in some of that. An avoidant who hops from one relationship to the next often doesn't, because they've found a way to skip it. That's what emotional regulation means here, in plain terms. They're using the new relationship to avoid sitting alone with everything the breakup brought up. The new person gives them novelty, distraction, validation, and a fresh hit of attachment energy, all without making them face a single consequence of what just ended. So from the outside, it looks dramatic. They seem lighter, they post more, they look more confident, more affectionate, more healed than you ever saw them. They look like they're thriving. But look closely at what you're seeing. That isn't transformation. A lot of the time, it's the relief of escape. They didn't get better because someone new showed up. They got relief because the old pressure disappeared. That's a completely different thing. And it's the thing your jealousy keeps mistaking for proof. You're going to keep circling one thought. But they seem so open with this person. Why couldn't they be like that with me? Here's the real answer. The new person feels easier to your ex because they aren't carrying any of the weight you were carrying by the end. Think about what the new person isn't right now. They're not attached to old arguments. They're not connected to a single unmet need. They're not a reminder of guilt or disappointment. They're not asking for repair. They're not standing in the room where your ex once failed someone. They haven't been let down yet, so there's nothing to defend against. You, by the end, were associated with all of it. Every hard conversation, every time they fell short, every need they couldn't meet. Not because you did anything wrong, but because that's what happens when a relationship gets real. History accumulates, pressure builds. The new person is meeting your ex before any of that exists, before the pattern gets triggered, before intimacy starts asking for something, before the fantasy has to become a real relationship. So yes, your ex can look more open, more warm, more available right now. Of course they can. There's nothing yet to be avoidant about. Let me make this as clear as I can. The new person is not better than you. They're earlier than you. And being earlier in the cycle can look a lot like being more compatible, but it is not the same thing. One is about timing, the other is about depth. Don't confuse the two, because your ex certainly will. This is the part that messes with people the most, so I want to be precise about it. Early stage avoidance can look almost identical to genuine growth from the outside, nearly indistinguishable. In the honeymoon phase, your ex seems warm, attentive. They communicate more than they ever did with you. They post the couple photos. They talk about the future. They show up looking like the exact person you begged them to become. And I know how that lands. It feels like confirmation of your worst fear, that they could have been that person all along. They just didn't want to be that person for you. But here's the distinction that breaks the spell. Early affection is not the same as emotional availability. Anyone can be warm when there's no history. Anyone can be generous when nothing's being asked of them. Anyone can romance someone when it's all new, flattering, and free of consequences. That's not the test. That was never the test. The real test is what happens when needs show up. When the new person has a bad day and wants comfort. When there's a conflict that has to be repaired instead of avoided. When the relationship stops being a highlight reel and starts being a place where two people have to actually be known. Affection is easy when there's no history. Consistency is what gets tested under pressure. Romance is easy during novelty. Accountability only begins when the fantasy ends. What you're watching right now is the part before any of that. You're watching the trailer and mistaking it for the whole film. Now I want to talk directly to those of you whose ex has a pattern, the ones who don't just move on, they bounce. One relationship ends, and almost immediately, there's a new one. There's always someone next. Sometimes there's someone waiting before the last one is even over. If that's your situation, pay close attention, because this pattern tells you something important. When a person repeatedly goes from one relationship straight into another, it's frequently a way of avoiding stillness. Being alone, with nothing to distract them, is the one thing they can't tolerate, because stillness is where all the uncomfortable stuff lives. Alone, they'd have to sit with the breakup, feel the grief instead of outrunning it, face their own part in why it collapsed, ask the question that keeps showing up. Why does the same thing keep happening, no matter who I'm with? A new relationship lets them skip every bit of that. It becomes a hiding place from the last one. You've seen the signs. They leave one relationship and start another fast. They always seem to have a backup. The moment they attach to someone new, they rewrite the past. Suddenly, the last relationship was the problem. You were the problem, and this new person is different. They treat each new partner like evidence that they were never the issue. And underneath all of it, they're confusing things that aren't the same. They confuse intensity with healing. They confuse movement with growth. They confuse being wanted with being ready. Here's the line I want you to hold on to. Someone can keep finding new people and never once meet themselves. A new face doesn't fix anything. It just delays the moment they'd have to look. Let's be honest about why this feels so personal, because it does, and there are real reasons for it. It feels personal because you remember begging for effort. You remember asking for clarity and getting vagueness. You remember being made to feel needy for wanting normal things. You remember being told in one way or another that you were too much, too emotional, too intense, too demanding, too hard to love. And now someone else seems to be getting, effortlessly, everything you were denied. So your mind makes the leap. If they can love this person so easily, then maybe I was the obstacle. Maybe it really was me. I need you to hear this clearly. No. Their new ease does not prove you were the obstacle. It proves the new relationship hasn't reached the same depth, the same history, or the same pressure yet. You're not comparing two relationships. You're comparing the end of yours to the beginning of theirs, and that's not a fair fight. It was never going to be. You are not watching your replacement. You are watching the beginning of a cycle you've already lived through from the inside. You know how this part goes, because you were once the new person too, back when it was easy, back before it got real. Here's the question sitting underneath all of this. So will it happen again? Will the pattern come back? I want to answer this carefully, because I'm not here to sell you a revenge fantasy, and I'm not going to tell you to sit around waiting for their new relationship to crash. That would just trap you in their life all over again, and you deserve better than that. But there is a real psychological sequence worth understanding, not so you can root for it, just so you can see clearly. If your ex hasn't done real work on themselves, the avoidance tends to follow a predictable path. It goes like this. Newness feels safe. Safety lets them get close. Closeness starts to create expectation. Expectation builds pressure. Pressure activates the avoidance, and avoidance creates distance, the same distance you knew so well. It's not random. It's a pattern, and patterns repeat until someone faces them. So the new person will eventually have needs, the same way you did. They'll eventually ask for consistency. They'll eventually feel confused by mixed signals. They'll eventually want reassurance, or honesty, or repair, or a real commitment. That's not a flaw in them. It's just what happens when a relationship stops being new. And if your ex hasn't changed, they'll meet those needs with the same tools they used on you. Withdrawal, minimizing, rationalizing, defensiveness, vagueness, the slow fade, or the sudden exit. Notice what that means. It was never about you not being good enough. It was about a pattern you happened to be standing in front of. The cycle doesn't end because the face changes. It ends when the pattern finally gets faced. And whether your ex ever does that is not your job to monitor. Now let's talk about what this is doing to you day to day, because there's a trap here, and a lot of you are deep inside it. You check the photos, you study the captions, you compare everything, your face, your body, your personality, your job, your style, how calm they look, how confident they seem. how easy their life appears next to the wreckage of yours. You analyze the timeline, you wonder if there was overlap. You look for proof the new thing is fake, then you look for proof it's real, and either way, you end the night feeling worse. I want to show you the mechanism, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Comparison feels like investigation. It feels like you're gathering evidence, getting to the bottom of something, finding the truth. But most of the time it isn't investigation at all. It's self-harm with extra steps. You think you're searching for the truth. What you're really searching for is a verdict on your worth, and you've appointed their new relationship as the judge. So hear me on this. You will not find your value inside their relationship. It's not in there. No matter how long you scroll, no matter how many photos you decode, the answer to, "Was I enough?" is not hidden in their new partner's smile. All you'll find is more material to wound yourself with. The investigation has no ending, because it was never really looking for facts. It was looking for relief it can't provide. So let's change the question, because you've been asking the wrong one. The question keeping you up at night is, are they happier with the new person? And that question has no useful answer. It just feeds the comparison. Here's a better one. What does their pattern actually tell me? Ask the questions that matter. Can they stay present when intimacy gets real? Can they repair after a conflict instead of running from it? Can they take accountability without disappearing? Can they keep loving someone once that person has needs? Can they handle being truly known past the honeymoon? Can they stop using newness to escape every time things get uncomfortable? Can they be consistent when love stops being easy? Those questions tell you something real. Do they look happy in a photo? Tells you nothing. But there's one more question, and it's the most important one in this whole video. It's not about them at all. Why am I using their new relationship as a courtroom for my own worth? Sit with that one, because that's the question that changes your life. The rest is just watching someone else's trailer and waiting for a review of yourself that's never going to come. And that brings me to the boundary, the part I really don't want you to miss. Understanding the pattern is not the same as waiting for it to repeat. Understanding the rebound is not the same as hoping it fails. Understanding their avoidance is not a reason to stay emotionally available to someone who left you confused, hurt, and alone. This is the line I want you to hold. You don't need their new relationship to collapse in order to know you mattered. You don't need them to come back in order to trust that what you lived through was real. You don't need the new person to be worse than you in order to feel worthy. And you do not need to win an imaginary competition you never even agreed to enter. Let me say the things you came here to hear, plainly. You were not replaced. You were not erased. The new person is not your upgrade. They're earlier in the cycle, not above you in value. Their speed is not a measurement of your worth. Newness is not healing. Relief is not transformation. A rebound can look exactly like growth from the outside. Movement is not maturity, and someone can keep finding new people and still never face themselves. You are not watching proof that you are unlovable. You're watching what avoidance does when stillness becomes too painful to sit in. Their new relationship cannot rewrite what was real between you. You don't need their failure to prove your value. You don't need their return to prove you mattered. So let me leave you with the truth, the whole truth. The part that hurts and the part that heals. No, their new relationship does not mean you were the problem. No, the new person is not your upgrade. No, their speed does not erase what happened between you. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it can look completely convincing from the outside, but newness is not healing. Relief is not transformation, and a rebound can look like love long before it has ever been tested by anything real. Your future cannot depend on watching their relationship for clues about your worth. There are no clues in there. You don't need their relationship to fail before you're allowed to feel valuable. You don't need them to come back before you're allowed to trust what you experienced was real. And you do not need to be chosen by someone avoidant in order to prove that you are always lovable. Here's what matters in the end. Not whether your ex can start over with someone new. Anyone can start something. What matters is whether they can stay, whether they can repair, whether they can take accountability instead of running, whether they can keep loving someone consistently when intimacy stops being easy and starts being real. That's the test they're walking toward, whether they know it or not, and it has nothing to do with your worth. You were real, what you felt was real, and no new relationship, no matter how fast, no matter how shiny, gets to take that away from you. I have been the relationship detective, and thank you for watching. If this helped you see things more clearly, please give it a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. I wish everyone watching all the best, and I hope to see you again in the next one.